What if I told you a single page from a judge just completely changed the momentum of one of Hollywood's most talked about legal battles? After weeks of speculation, Blake Lively tried to push for sanctions against the attorney representing Justin Baldoni. The filing was long, detailed, and serious, but the judge's response? Just one page. And the decision could signal a much bigger shift in how this entire case moves forward. The story begins with something that at first seems simple, almost ordinary, a moment where an actor talks about playing a character who is not perfect, not polished, not trying too hard, someone who simply exists in a quiet, confident way, and that small reflection sets the stage for something much bigger, because while that conversation about authenticity was happening, something else was unfolding far away in a courtroom in New York City, a moment that many people watching this legal battle have been waiting for, and when the decision finally arrived, it carried the kind of quiet impact that often changes the direction of a story without any dramatic announcement, because in that courtroom a judge reviewed a motion connected to Blake Lively, and the request itself had been serious, an attempt to sanction attorney Bryan Freedman, who represents parties connected to Justin Baldoni, and for weeks speculation had been building about what the court might decide, because the motion centered on statements that had been made outside the courtroom, interviews, conversations, public commentary that Lively's legal team argued could potentially influence how the case might be viewed by the public and eventually by jurors. But as the arguments unfolded, something became clear. The judge was not focusing on the noise around the case, he was focused on timing, evidence, and the legal threshold required to prove harm. And when the ruling finally arrived, it was surprisingly short, just one page, a decision that denied the request for sanctions, and suddenly the narrative around the case shifted, because what had once been framed as a major confrontation over courtroom conduct became something else entirely, a reminder that legal strategy and public perception do not always move in the same direction. And this is where the story begins to turn, because the denial did not simply end a motion, it opened a new question about what happens next in a case where every filing, every statement, and every headline is being watched closely by both supporters and critics of the people involved. As the details of the motion began circulating, many observers realized how extensive the request had been. The filing itself was long, detailed, and supported by numerous exhibits describing statements that had been made in interviews, including one appearance on TMZ where Freedman discussed the case publicly, and the argument presented by Lively's team suggested that repeated comments about her credibility and character could shape public perception long before the trial even began. And this is where the legal debate became especially interesting, because the rule cited in the motion focused on whether statements outside the courtroom might create a substantial likelihood of influencing an eventual jury pool. But the judge examined the timeline closely, and that timeline turned out to be crucial. Many of the statements referenced in the motion had been made months earlier, far from the expected trial date, and because of that distance in time, the court concluded that the argument had not demonstrated a strong enough risk to the fairness of the future proceedings, which meant that even if the statements were controversial, they did not meet the legal standard required for sanctions. And this moment revealed something about the complexity of high-profile civil cases, because while public narratives move quickly, the legal system moves carefully, step by step. And in this case, the judge chose not to weigh in on every individual comment or determine whether they technically violated professional guidelines. Instead, the court looked at the bigger question, whether the statements created a real, measurable threat to the integrity of the trial, and the answer given in the ruling was no. And with that single conclusion, a lengthy motion that had generated headlines suddenly ended with a quiet but significant denial. What makes this moment even more fascinating is the broader context surrounding the dispute, because this case has never existed in isolation. It has unfolded alongside interviews, media coverage, online discussion, and ongoing speculation about the motivations and strategies of everyone involved. Supporters of Lively have argued that public commentary about her could damage her reputation and influence how audiences interpret the legal claims, while supporters of Baldoni and his legal team have argued that attorneys have a responsibility to defend their clients, especially when accusations are being widely discussed in public forums, and somewhere between those two perspectives sits the legal framework itself, which attempts to balance freedom of speech with the need for fair trials, and this balance became central to the judge's reasoning because the court noted that the statements in question occurred long before any jury would be selected, which reduced the likelihood that they would have a lasting impact on the proceedings, and that reasoning effectively reframed the situation not as a dramatic violation but as part of the complicated communication environment that often surrounds high-profile litigation. And as analysts began reviewing the ruling, another theme emerged: the difference between what captures attention in headlines and what ultimately matters in legal arguments, because a filing can be long, detailed and emotionally compelling, yet still fail to meet the strict evidentiary requirements that courts demand, and that is exactly what appears to have happened here, turning what some expected to be a major disciplinary moment into a procedural outcome that reinforces how high the legal bar truly is. Now the story moves into its most intriguing phase, because while the motion itself has been resolved, the broader case continues, and with it the ongoing discussion about how public narratives influence complex legal battles. Observers are already asking what this decision might signal for future motions, whether additional disputes over statements or filings will appear, and how both sides will adjust their strategies moving forward, because in cases involving well-known public figures, every development carries layers of meaning beyond the courtroom itself. And even though the ruling did not directly determine who is right or wrong in the underlying dispute, it did establish something important: the court will require clear evidence of actual harm before restricting public commentary, and that message could shape the tone of the remaining proceedings in ways that are not yet fully visible. Which brings us back to the beginning of this story, the idea of authenticity and perception, because just as actors attempt to portray characters who feel real, legal narratives also attempt to shape how events are understood by audiences inside and outside the courtroom. And the question that remains hanging over this case is not simply who will ultimately prevail, but how each new ruling will shift the conversation surrounding it. And if this latest decision has shown anything, it is that the legal process can sometimes deliver its most significant turning points quietly in a single page that changes the direction of the story, while leaving everyone watching to wonder what the next chapter will reveal. This moment in the courtroom may not have come with dramatic speeches or lengthy explanations, but its impact is still being discussed, because the denial of the sanctions motion changed the immediate momentum of the dispute and reminded everyone following the case that legal outcomes depend on evidence, timing, and strict procedural standards rather than public pressure alone. For now, attorney Bryan Freedman remains fully involved in representing the parties connected to Justin Baldoni, while Blake Lively's broader legal claims continue to move forward through the court system. The ruling does not determine the final outcome of the larger case, but it does highlight how carefully judges evaluate claims that public commentary might affect a future jury. As additional hearings, filings, and decisions approach, observers will continue watching closely, because high-profile cases rarely move in straight lines. Instead, they unfold through moments like this, where a single page of legal reasoning quietly reshapes the expectations surrounding everything that comes next. And the real question now is how both sides will respond as the story continues to develop. As this chapter of the story closes, the most important thing to understand is that this ruling does not end the broader legal dispute. Instead, it represents one step in a much longer process that is still unfolding. In high-profile cases involving public figures, every motion, filing, and courtroom decision often becomes part of a larger narrative that plays out not only in court but also across media coverage and public discussion. The recent ruling denying the sanctions request against attorney Bryan Freedman simply means that the court did not find sufficient evidence that the statements in question were likely to interfere with a future jury or the fairness of the proceedings. It does not determine the ultimate truth of the claims made by either side. What it does show is how carefully courts evaluate requests that involve limiting speech or disciplining legal representatives during ongoing litigation. For observers following the case connected to Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, the decision highlights an important principle of the legal system. Courts tend to focus on concrete legal standards rather than speculation about possible outcomes. When a party asks for sanctions, they must show clear evidence that certain actions created a meaningful risk to the integrity of the judicial process. In this situation, the judge determined that the timeline of the statements and the lack of demonstrated impact on a potential jury pool did not meet that threshold. Because of that, the request was denied. This kind of reasoning may seem straightforward in legal terms, but in public conversations it often becomes more complicated as people interpret the decision through different perspectives and expectations. Another key takeaway from this moment is how the timing of legal arguments can shape their effectiveness. In many cases, judges examine not only what was said or done but also when those events occurred. The court noted that the statements referenced in the motion happened months before the anticipated trial date, which made it difficult to prove that they would influence jurors at that future stage of the case. This demonstrates how legal analysis often focuses on specific procedural details that might not receive as much attention in media coverage. For viewers and readers who follow these developments closely, understanding that difference can help provide a clearer picture of how and why certain rulings are made. At the same time, the broader case remains active, and there may still be additional filings, hearings, and decisions ahead. Legal disputes involving well-known figures tend to evolve over time as both sides present evidence, respond to claims, and ask the court to consider different aspects of the situation. Each new ruling can shape the strategy moving forward, sometimes in subtle ways. While the denial of the sanctions motion may be seen as a moment of relief for the legal team representing Baldoni's side, it does not resolve the underlying issues that brought the case into the courtroom in the first place. Those questions will ultimately be addressed through the normal legal process, which includes discovery, argument, and potentially a trial where evidence is examined more closely. For audiences watching from the outside, this moment also serves as a reminder that legal stories rarely unfold as quickly as headlines might suggest. Real court proceedings move step by step, with each decision building on the last. Sometimes the most important developments arrive quietly, in brief orders or procedural rulings that shape the direction of the case behind the scenes. Even when a decision appears simple, its impact can still influence how the next stages of the process unfold. Looking ahead, the focus will likely shift toward the next developments in the case and how both sides choose to proceed. Observers, legal commentators, and members of the public will continue analyzing each update, searching for clues about what it might mean for the final outcome. But until the full case is heard and resolved, any conclusions remain part of an ongoing conversation rather than a definitive ending. For now, this ruling simply marks another point in a complex legal journey, one that is still far from finished and will likely continue to draw attention as new information and decisions emerge in the months ahead.